I couldn't sleep tonight, so I got up in the middle of the night, and while casting about for something to do, I stumbled upon these stories. They really touched me, and I just felt like I had to share them with you. The first, a tale of true genius and quiet triumph. And the second, a story of two souls and one song, 80 years in the making. The melody that never said goodbye. In the vast hush of a grand auditorium, where hearts beat with hope and silence speaks louder than sound, the stage held two figures, frail in form but commanding in presence. A man and a woman, a violin and a piano, a lifetime between them. The lights dimmed. Then the old man stepped forward, his back slightly bent with age, yet his voice, clear, steady, carried the weight of time. My name is Kenji, he began. I am 97 years old. This is Sayuri, the last living soul who remembers the boy I once was. A murmur of awe rippled through the audience. Tonight, he continued, you will not hear a performance. You will hear a memory. A song written long ago, but never finished. A song that waited 80 years for its final note. He paused, his gaze falling gently on Sayuri. Her hands rested on the keys before her, still as stone, yet brimming with quiet grace. I was 18, Kenji said, his voice softening, when the sky disappeared. A breath caught in the crowd. It was August the 6th, 1945. We were two students in Hiroshima, young, dreaming. She played the piano and I the violin. That morning, we were in our classroom, composing a melody together. Gentle, simple, full of hope. I remember. I had spent weeks searching for the courage to tell her how I felt, but before I found the words, he closed his eyes. The sun fell from the sky. No sound, no warning, just a white light so blinding it felt as though the earth had been erased. I thought I had died, he whispered, and perhaps, in a way, I had. His voice trembled, not with fear, but with the rawness of remembrance. They found me hours later, buried in rubble. My hand was burned, my eye gone, my violin shattered. Everyone I loved had vanished, and Sayuri was gone. He looked down, swallowing the grief of decades. For 70 years I carried that silence. I never married, never played again, because every note, every chord brought back the ghost of that day, of that unfinished song. A pause. The audience held their breath. Then, 7 years ago, a letter found its way to me. A survivors group. Someone named Sayuri Mori was searching, asking if I was still alive. He smiled faintly, tears glimmering in his eyes. I wept for 3 days before I could pick up the phone. And when they met again, he said, words weren't needed. Only tears. Only the embrace of two souls who had outlived history. She bore the scars. Her family gone. Her brother lost. She had thought me dead. I her. And yet, we were there, breathing together. They had met on a bench in the park, two aged spirits, bent but unbroken. I asked her, Kenji said, turning once more to Sayuri. Do you remember the melody? Sayuri's voice, delicate and sure, answered the question in that moment. I never forgot. And so they played. Hands that had known war and loss found their way back to music, back to a dream. This piece, Kenji said, his voice steady now, is not for fame. It is for farewell. A lullaby for the children we once were. A prayer for the ones who never came home. A song of peace. Then silence. And into that silence, the first note bloomed. The melody drifted across the room like morning light after a long winter. Gentle, sorrowful, and full of grace. There were no words. None were needed. Only music. Only memory. And when the final note faded and the hush returned, the entire hall rose, not in celebration, but in reverence. A standing ovation, not for technique, but for truth, for the triumph of love over ruin, of music over silence, of life over loss. And in that moment, as Kenji bowed his head and Sayuri rested her hands once more, the world remembered not just what had been lost, but what somehow still endured. The engineer. In the golden age of American industry, where machines roared like thunder and progress surged ahead like a relentless tide, there existed a man whose brilliance needed no noise to be noticed. His name? Charles Proteus Steinmetz. Now, you may have heard the old tale of the engineer who sent an invoice for $10,000 after fixing a broken machine with nothing more than a chalk mark and a few words of instruction. $1 for making the mark, and $9,999 for knowing where to place it. It sounds almost mythical, doesn't it? But let me tell you now, this is no fable. It is a true story, quietly tucked into the annals of history, but no less extraordinary for its subtlety. It happened at the River Rouge plant, Henry Ford's industrial masterpiece. One day, a vital generator stopped working. It didn't sputter, it didn't whine, it simply stopped. And with it, so did the rhythm of the entire plant. Ford's own engineers, brilliant minds in their own right, fumbled and failed, unable to identify the fault. In desperation, Ford called Steinmetz. He arrived not with a brigade of assistants, nor with a chest of gleaming tools. He asked only for a notebook, a pen, and a cot. For 2 days and 2 nights he remained at the site, sleeping only when necessary, scribbling strange symbols, listening to the silence of the machine as if it were speaking to him in whispers only he could understand. On the 3rd day, he stood up. He requested a ladder, a tape measure, and a piece of chalk. Slowly, deliberately, he climbed to the top of the silent giant, measured carefully, and marked a single X on the casing. He descended, turned to the baffled engineers, and said calmly, "Open this panel. Remove 16 turns of wire from this coil, exactly from here." There was no debate. They obeyed. And then, like a miracle of mechanics, the generator burst back into life, its hum returning like the heartbeat of the plant. A week later, Ford received a bill. $10,000. Surprised by the amount, Ford requested an itemized invoice. The reply came. Making chalk mark, $1. Knowing where to put it, $9,999. And Ford, a man not easily impressed, paid the sum without a word, because he understood. This was not a payment for labour, but for a lifetime of mastery. For the thousands of hours Steinmetz had poured into understanding what others couldn't even name. For the wisdom to see what others could not. You see, Charles Steinmetz stood only 4 feet tall. His spine was curved by disease, his gait uneven, his body shaped by misfortune. But his mind towered over nearly every man of his time. Einstein knew him, Edison respected him, Tesla admired him, and Ford trusted him. This was a man who turned silence into answers, who found music in machines, who could listen to the stillness of a broken generator and hear exactly what was missing. In an age obsessed with speed, noise, and spectacle, Steinmetz reminded the world that the rarest brilliance often speaks softly, marked only by a quiet X in chalk.